Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to what I've been very much looking forward to doing with Joel Schafer, who I had on quite a few months back, and I've been really getting myself immersed into the Castaneda work, and would like to kind of just expand on the conversation. And who better to talk to than with Joel Schafer? Joel, thank you so much, man, for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, man. So glad you invited me on and glad you're reading that material. It's really strong for me as well. And I could talk about it for days. So it's a good subject.
Awesome. Uh, so yeah, what I wanted to start with was erasing personal history because um, that when I came across the material and read more into what was talked about, especially when Juan Matus talks about erasing personal history, it was quite even challenging for Carlos to take on from what he said. And
For
he
sure.
goes, by doing so, one must proceed harmoniously to chop it off little by little.
Yeah.
Um, so have you started to, or have you started to erase your personal history? And if so, what are what is the
Mm.
best way of going about it?
Yeah, I have. And the recapitulation is super magical, and that's what they're referring to. That's how you do it. There can be many, many ways to recapitulate, though.
Mm,
Sometimes it can happen huge chunks of feelings are resolved within your being about an event that you were clinging on to, or you had an idea of yourself that was based on something that somebody told you that they see in you that built up or propped up your ego and made you perceive yourself from that angle. And so anytime you're clearing or releasing anything from your past, you're making room for the magic to come in, because it's that inventory that we're carrying that is a burden that we're not meant to be carrying. So when you free yourself up of any of these feelings, it's like it unlocks them like little birds free to fly away and to explore. And we don't want to be capturing anything or keeping anything in prison. We want to let everything go. And the more you start doing this, the more you start realizing that you're getting freed up from who you thought you were and who people thought you were, and you're becoming starting to identify with a more eternal relating to the moment and to the now. So you
mm,
become more conscious and alert in the present, without having to reference the past as a means to understand it. So the recapitulation just grows on itself. The more you gain access to memories, they become clearer and more crisp. And it's so incredible to have access to them that recapitulating becomes, rather than a chore, it becomes what you choose, how you choose to spend your time. And since your youthful energy is available to regather while you're there, then you get all this boost of creativity and imagination that comes from your which kind of coalesce with the inner child work. You end up sort of dealing with your wounded part of yourself that maybe didn't get to completely express itself at a certain age and started creating armor and getting a little, shy or whatever. So you end up coaxing that part of you to come forward and to communicate its needs, which is the shadow work,
mm.
right? So it all ends up being connected. But to truly erase one's personal history is a necessity to become lucid enough to do really advanced dreaming. It's just like baggage that doesn't allow your vehicle to travel. And so we're just doing the necessary work that is on a cellular level. And that's why I say recapitulation is the most powerful form of purification that is available to us.
Mm.
Um, and so a lot of people say you have to eat this way and you have to do all these things and everything has to be just so to purify. But most people just don't know about the recapitulation. And if they did, they wouldn't be so adamant about focusing on all those things that are less, in my opinion, less effective and less important. And I'm not saying you can't do incredible things without the recapitulation. A lot of people do face their emotional trauma through physical purification that ends up surfacing and powerful healing can happen in that way too. Um, but our history determines our self-importance. And if we are able to erase that and be comfortable in that more fluid state, because it is less structure, you start to become more lighter, which means you have to figure out how to get really grounded in another way than you were being grounded through your density and that baggage that was keeping you sort of down. And then you
Mm.
start to lift off as you become less attached to your past. And so it requires, unless you want to be really ungrounded, that you figure out how to get really rooted, which is an energetic thing, not, I mean, you can do it through martial arts or whatever, but you'll feel energetic roots start to be able to go down further and further into the mother, and you feel more and more energetically stable. And that's where a lot of the freedom comes in, is that you're no longer feeling the need for others to validate you or to be propped up by uh, having a partner or any of the things that a lot of people look to make sure their foundation's in place. The foundation becomes energetic. And so yeah, man, it's a whole network of liberation that comes with erasing personal history.
Mm.
Carlos was really scared of, he couldn't even handle being alone, so he was, even though he was really advanced in those stages of the books, he was still quite a lopsided character because he was really dense and had a lot of um he just had a lot of attachment to what scientists and people believed in, and Don Juan was pulling that out from under him, and he was resisting it on a deep level. But that density is what made him, on some level, that was a gift for him, because Don Juan could take him into all these worlds and show him inconceivable things, and the next day he'd forget about it like it didn't even happen because he's so dense.
Mm.
And so it was a quality, and even though it was sort of made it really difficult for him to finally come to terms with what Don Juan was teaching him, and that didn't really happen until Don Juan left the world.
Mm. Yeah, he kept on putting him into heightened states of awareness, um, for him for him to have a proper conversation with him, for him to kind of get it. And
Yeah,
obviously, when he goes back to his assemblage point, goes back to the normal, then he forgets everything that was said. But yeah, I'm so glad that he managed to, recapitulate that and bring all this knowledge to us, because
me
yeah,
too.
through my whole entire search, from going my beginnings, from going from, through opening up to the conspiratorial aspects of reality, and then going into psychology and the more philosophical spiritual stuff, it just led me to this point, here. This has been like the edge of the mystery, so to speak.
Uh,
So and it's so this I find so much resonance with the material.
mm.
What would you say to people who obviously who starts to read this material and think, okay, this is ridiculous. This is so fantastical, and it's almost like fictional. And you can see how people could, I guess, using reason would be one of the ways, right?
Well, yeah, it is very challenging to consider that this type of, it's confronting too. It's like, it's kind of like, wait, what could this even be possible? And in order to sort of validate or justify how kind of boring our lives are in comparison, we end up trying to making the assumption that this is made up. Or but when you realize that they're talking about their dreaming bodies, and that a lot of the things they're doing, it's with their astral selves. It's not,
Mm.
it may Carlos's interpretation of it is sort of confusing, but it's just that these people have found the twin world. They've gone inward and accessed these other, and most people can recognize that there's probably other dimensions.
Mm.
And if you can think of it in that terms, these are people interacting in different layers of the onion. And the as you get used to that, it becomes a place in which you can do incredible things, just like snowboarders or athletes have pushed the limit of their body. Shamans learn to discover what's available with their energy body, and so they do all kinds of strange things. And um the way Carlos writes it would sound confusing. And I mean, The reality is we are energetic travelers, beings that can biolocate, we can have telepathy, we can
Mm.
have what's called direct knowing. We have access to silent knowledge. And if you were to spend decades in silent knowledge, eventually you would start to be able to do things that would be considered impossible. And it's just a matter of banishing all doubts from your mind and recognizing that silence can be maintained. If you can stay in silence and hold that intensity, eventually you'll figure out how to make use of it. And shamans don't typically like announce or share their adventures because it's just very personal.
Mm.
Carlos did a good job of sharing without getting too personal, but his adventuring was significant. The things he got to do every night when he would put his head or wherever laid his head down or get in weird positions so he could stay in dreaming. He got to travel and talk to other beings from other worlds and have conversations that are just as real as you and I talking right now. Um, and eventually he was able to, you know, go have what they call tales of power, where you go on adventures in other worlds. The activation of our consciousness, and people take power plants and have the most profound experiences, but then they think, well, that was a drug, that was the plant, but in reality the plant just delivered them to a natural resource that is available within each of us. So it's just a matter of, it's we're lucky that not everybody believes in this stuff. In a way, it's good that the world is unaware. It serves as a buffer for those of us that are doing this work. So
Mm.
let them think it's a made up. Let them think that Carlos was a trickster. And he was. I mean, some of the stuff he wrote was designed to throw people off course too. Like he would tell people, I was born in Peru, and I was born in Brazil, oh, I was born on this date. He was just constantly saying things because he didn't care if people thought he was a liar or not. He
Mm.
had liberated himself from the need to be validated by social power. And so there are even parts of those books that weren't his stories. They were stories that Carol Tiggs had. And then they decided to let it be consolidated as if they were his, because they were during a time where they thought a female author wouldn't be as that people wouldn't be that interested. And they were right. But so there's so much more to these adventures than what he even wrote about. And so I got to spend time with Carol Tiggs and
Mm.
get to see and feel and tap into somebody who is very is otherworldly, and you can sense that with certain people that they're not really relatable anymore. They're sort of in this other realm of activity and the way in which they spend time. And as I start to do more and more darkroom dreaming and start to go further into my inner power, I start to recognize what's happened to people like her and start to
Mm.
get glimpses of what it would be like to be a traveler into to that degree that Carlos and her and Don Juan and these people had achieved. Um, and the recapitulation becomes so much more desirable to continue because you recognize that it's purely just that will allow us to start to travel again. So yeah, I'm glad people resist or think that it's made up. I think it serves its purpose. And of course, the most powerful and mysterious and magical things that are just right there for us to purchase, that's too easy. So there's going to be different versions of it being kept at bay.
Mm.
Um, but Carlos did get in a lot of trouble with people because a lot of people were taking psychedelics after reading his books, and they wanted to blame somebody for the things that happened to their kids. And even the CIA visited Carlos after his
Oh,
first
wow.
book and said, you need to shut this down. And so his later books didn't include a lot of the power plant stuff because um, not that there wasn't other stories to tell, but that he didn't want to be dealing with these people uh, putting pressure on him to write things. So he sort of acquiesced to their request.
Mm. Wow.
but it would be more phantasmagorical if he had had stuff. So it's interesting how things play out.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I didn't even know of that backstory. That's really interesting. And um, and having met to have for you to have met Carol as well, that's a very rare thing and a privilege as well to kind of feel the energy of somebody and see
Mm.
for yourself, I guess. Um, so just going into um just a bit more about the erasing personal history. Juan Matus also said about he said like little by little he created a fog around him from his personal history.
Mm.
What do you think he means by the fog? This fog he talks about.
Yeah, like he said that he created a fog around himself so that nobody knew whether he was coming or going, including himself. So you become so liberated from this program mind that you're not linear anymore. You've become non-linear, and you make every second count. In fact, the seconds go away and it becomes you're hanging out within eternal moments that are blending into other eternal moments.
Mm,
So there's the benefit of microdosing and starting to tap into what it would be like to be in an altered state all the time, or this is why I do the movements so often, is that they're truly moving my perception. But that fog is that you've become so abstract that you're being nobody can kind of pinpoint who you are or project anything onto you anymore because you've become elusive. You become not in a manipulative way. You just become
mm,
truly liberated, and so you never know what you're going to say. You really almost like listening to yourself talk. And that's how what it looks like when you're around Carol. It's like she's plucking things from this place. So she goes to speak and you can tell there's like a little delay or something, like she's getting it's very powerful, and you can feel that presence, that dark sea of awareness, like you're in the presence of this being that is very in touch with eternity, with the eternal, with the infinite,
mm,
and has become a magical creature and is no longer a human. Really, it's more like uh, a perceiver, a being that is having direct encounter with, they say shamans turn and face time as it's coming at them rather than receding like most people perceive things. And so it's, a very powerful way of being, and it builds up a very unique trust with a very dynamic guidance system. So you're constantly being guided in each microsecond instead of having any linear predictability at all. And that creates this illusionary feeling of that person is not somebody you could pin down or put a label on. And that's the magic of being a stalker. That's the magic of being uh, in in that flow state. And Don Juan said that he life he had erased his personal history so completely that he was like a collection of stories. He was just receiving, and this is what happened to Carlos too, is you could go back and have access to other people's memories. Anyone in their lineage
mm,
became accessible, and so that you could review their recapitulation as well. And so when that's accessible to you, you can't afford to be caught in your personal self because you now have access to a library of untouched, pure, raw knowledge that only your lineage has access to, and there's no way you could ever cover all of it. So but you do your best to make as much room and empty yourself as completely as possible to spend as much time getting to know the spirit of the warrior by reviewing the lineage that you are in, and there prepares you for your death, which is the ultimate adventure, is to glide into eternity with all of your consciousness intact and start traveling from vision to vision. So this is a vision that we're in, and you
mm,
can go from this vision to an entire other vision. And once you have access like that, you know, you're going to become very mysterious, and that's what that fog is.
mm. Wow. Yeah, it's quite interesting because we kind of do a sort of little death every day, every time we go to sleep, right? You know,
Yeah.
you rise during the day and then you go into the darkness at night, and it's like that returning to the womb, so to speak. But when you're asleep, you're dreaming, you're not really dead. So death is
Yeah.
just not another door of perception, perhaps. Um,
Well, it is and it isn't, you know, like
yeah.
death, the death that's coming for all of us is quite final in a lot of ways. People try to make it sound all pretty and stuff, but in reality, it's a massive, you know, you're basically being ripped apart energetically, and it's crushing. It's
Mm,
painful unless you are on the battlefield fighting for your life and you're not going to let your spirit ever get taken. Then there's this powerful transformation. So our domestication is our demise. We have to
mm,
somehow rewild and become really in touch with our power so that we can have enough personal power to have a death that is meaningful. And that can happen in a hospital bed. I'm not saying that it has to be under certain conditions, but we want to keep our awareness intact. We don't want to become senile and unconscious and die in a way that keeps us from that ultimate process. But they say the luminous cocoon is broken open and all of you spills out, and
mm,
that there's thousands of individual pieces of awareness within each of us. And right now they're consolidated and they represent us. But when we are broken open, when death opens us up, all of those individual awarenesses all leave and go in their own separate directions, never to return.
mm,
And shamans do is they open themselves up to death and experience all those thousands of pieces of awareness encountering their eternity. And then you call them back in so that you have a shamanic death rather than an actual death. And that purification that occurs upon that, you become aware of your multiplicity. And so, if we are inspired by these concepts and we want to become really strong and capable of that type of flexibility, then we will take care of ourselves energetically so that we don't die a typical death, but
mm,
instead utilize that transformation time as a means to receive the final delivery or blow that would send us into these other layers of the onion. And so you transfer your physical energy into pure consciousness and make use of this temple rather than let it be disposed of. So old school
yeah.
shamans would have in their coffin would be rocks to symbolize them, or to to trick the villagers into thinking that they died, but in reality they left this world with their, not just with their spirit, but with, they transferred their physicality into pure energy and used it as a vehicle, and they essentially become inorganic beings that are conscious and get to live really long lives. So a lot of people think inorganic being means is a negative term. It's just, it's not. There just happens to be lots of inorganic beings that are parasitic, as well as there's inorganic beings that are helpful.
Mm. Yeah, I remember reading into some of the um, conversations they had about organic and inorganic beings, and Carlos asking Don Juan about how many of them there are, and he said there's less of those inorganic beings, but they're much more they live much longer than
Yeah.
the organic ones as well, which is really interesting. Um,
That's their attraction to us, is that we live really short lives with lots of bright, powerful energy.
mm,
They dole their light out over so long of a period of time, it's almost immortal. So they're just, which makes sense. It's kind of interesting. We could learn a lot from that.
mm,
You know, that's what the Death to Fire did. And when you read The Art of Dreaming, it explains learn to do very strange things with his energy in order to live thousands of years on this earth. Or
Mm,
then he became a she, so it's properly a she now. But the Death of Fire figured out the tricks of assemblage point and how to use sexual energy and to prolong her life. And she had to be he had to become a she in order to escape captivity of the inorganic realm, because the inorganic world is primarily female, and females are not easy to trap where men are,
mm,
um, because of a variety of reasons. But yeah, it's something to learn about, and we can form relationships with inorganic beings and learn from them directly through dreaming. And that's a lot of what shamans have. That's the reason why they know so much about this universe, is the inorganic beings have to answer your questions. But they're doing so as a means to try to lure you into their world, because they're attracted to our bright luminosity, just like we're attracted to eating fruit or
mm,
an animal or whatever it is. Uh, so we're not the top of the food chain, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from those that are.
mm,
We can evolve, and shamans specifically can learn to stop giving their energy over to these inorganic beings entirely by becoming conscious of how this all works, which is to become conscious in your dream time so that you're not going into the depths of unconsciousness at night. You're becoming aware that you're dreaming, and then you're not being tapped in the way that you are when you go all the way out.
mm.
So some tricks there as well.
Beautifully said. Yeah. You even talked about how some of the inorganic beings turned into allies. Is that right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
So that's a big part of it too, is you can
mm,
go out in the wilderness and attract an ally if you were so daring enough. And the Yeti, the Sasquatch, are often allies for shamans.
mm,
These are like when Carlos would be out there in the wilderness and all the branches were breaking and it sounded like something was there. That's the sound of the allies. That's the letting them know they're trying to pull on your gap and try to, and they're not they can't help it. They're just sort of, we're so unconscious we can't see them and they can see us, and so they're just basically testing our ability to not lose our mind by putting us in situations that are quite trying
mm,
to our normal perception. But as you become fearless and you reach the place of no pity, you stop being afraid, you stop being feeling sorry for your situation, you learn how to turn and face and deal with these projections. And that's what they are. They're from another world, and they're projecting themselves into ours, and we're actually projections too. We're projecting ourselves from another place. And so shamans learn to go backwards through the stream of consciousness to that which is projecting this entire illusion, and from there they jump grooves and experience other visions just as encompassing as this one. So we are here to learn that, how to
mm,
transfer our attention from what's here to other more deeper places. Having an organic being as an ally is incredibly helpful in telling you things that you might need to know, or showing you where an apprentice might be, or it Don Juan would use it to track his apprentices' moves to find out what they were up to. That way he could just be kicking back doing what he's doing. He's got his these energies out there. Or my elder, he would be asleep at night, or he'd go into dreaming, and his grandmothers would come and tell him about people in different parts of the world, and he could send another apprentice to go and find these people who would be wherever they were told they would be, and let them know, hey, we were told about you, do you want to come to New Mexico and train? And then that's how all these apprentices started showing up.
mm,
So these inorganic beings, I have a helper as well. A girlfriend of mine died, and she became available to me as a helper. It took me years to realize what she was offering me. In fact, it was other shamans that had to kind of point it out, like, dude, you have this powerful helper that's like trying to talk to you all this time. And I was kind of like, still like, just what? What do you mean? Eventually, I was able to form that bridge of communication, and since then, I've had a lot more come in. So there's some people are into power and they go off and they try to get inorganic beings that are really powerful to help them. And
Mm,
other people like myself, they come naturally and you don't have to go and get into these weird exchanges with beings that you don't even know. Why would you do that? That's crazy.
mm.
So you have your ancestors already helping you. It's
You still there, Joel?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. So I was just saying we have our ancestors already. It's just a matter of making contact with them.
Mm. Yeah, well, it puts puts a new interpretation on what the religious text talks about in terms of
Yeah.
demons, and in the Christian faiths, and the jinn in Islam. So yeah, it's really fascinating how these kind of corroborate with the other pieces of information in this realm. You know.
It's all validated. Yeah, it's something we can validate, and all these different systems talk about these things. But we
Mm,
want to come out of the religious programming of good and bad and right and wrong and all the
mm,
fear because it that just taints everything. It's really hard for an apprentice of the Toltec knowledge to shed that spiritual religious fear that seems
mm,
to have invaded and be associated with even the most evolutionary concepts. And that's what I call programming. These
mm,
all the religions are programs, and they're very well and thoroughly done as a means to keep people from discovering their power. They end up handing their power over to some deity or some religious system, and that's makes people controllable.
mm,
So now that scientism, they as long as everybody believes all the lies around how, you know, viruses and all the different things that we're being told, it keeps people under a spell that doesn't allow them to be critical of their own thoughts.
mm,
And therefore the program continues to control. And so the religion's not working as much as it used to, and that's why they're introducing these new systems.
mm. Yeah, it ties into something I wanted to ask you about as well, which I'll need to go and revisit the books because the amount of information in there, it just some of it just it goes over, and it's like I need to go back and really study this. It's almost like a study. You can't just read these books as if it's like some fictional book. The amount of information that's in there is it's massive. It's huge. And one needs to go over them so many times before you integrate all the information. Um,
Well, and
so
even then
yeah.
you read stuff and be like, I've never read this. There's no way I ever read this because I needed this information so bad back then. How could I have missed this? And it's like it's magically protected. Like I call it the never ending story. It just keeps giving and giving and giving.
Yeah. Um, just going back to touching on the religious programming, um, when uh, Carlos was shown the mold of man,
Mm.
um, that also obviously he obviously saw it as God.
Yeah.
And can you kind of expand a bit about the mold of man? Because since we've touched upon these religious
Mm.
programs.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting that there are there are energetic truths, energetic facts that Don Juan put Carlos in front of as a part of his being his protege.
Mm,
And they're necessary, they're unavoidable encounters that one will have with these these key pieces to our how we are created. So there is a mold
yeah.
and we all go through it. That's how we come into being, and it's the dark sea of awareness, what they call the eagle. It perpetuates awareness as a means to create the possibility of new discoveries. And so we're all put through these, we're all like energetic probes that are in place to make new discoveries. And that's why people that forge new neural pathways or become liberated and free and start just exploring what's possible, there's a lot of energy lent to people like this
Mm,
because it's like a return on investment. And so that's why materialism is such a trap, is that as people start to accumulate and identify their ego with wealth or with status, it it can very much hijack their freedom and their curiosity from exploring and becoming more conscious of what they're capable and how resourceful they could be. That's
Mm.
why Carlos was forced to give up all of his money and home and go train. He had to go somewhere and start over with no money in his wallet and beg for a job and find a place to live and see what it would take for him to survive. And that's where he became very resourceful
Mm.
and very, very much balanced his ego as he was getting all these book deals and making all this money. Don Juan said, if you want to keep your apprenticeship, you need to go and start over and see what you're made of. So there's just, it's important to be very lucid if we want to have experiences like seeing the mold of man
Mm.
and being moved by such a beautiful, energetic piece of the puzzle.
Mm.
And because of the beauty and how what a just pure experience to have, if one still has religious programming within their system that they haven't purged, it's going to translate to them as being God or
Mm.
a saint or Michael, or they're going to be like, oh my God, this is, and that's just, and same with Carlos was taken to these other realms as well, where he was shown like people praying and candle lights and all these old school
That's right.
religious traditions, and he just
Mm.
wept and just was like, please don't take me, I want to live here, like he was just so willing to hand his power over to these, and these are just inorganic worlds filled with
Mm.
another deception of illusion just like this one. And so anytime unless we really become liberated from programming, it's going to find its way to be part of our filter
Mm.
when we have experiences like the spirit of a mountain coming to talk to you while you're camping. Like a lot of people have had these experiences and then they think that they met God or something, but it would be similar in a way. The spirit of a
Mm.
mountain coming to talk to you in human form, that's pretty godlike. That's pretty cool. But we
Yeah.
don't need to get any more than that. We don't need to add to it and make it even more important, because nothing really is more important than anything else. It's all sort of it levels out. But that's the nature, is that we put things above us and we put things below us,
Mm.
right? And so we encounter something that's not typical and we give it more importance than it deserves. But we want to be fluid enough to have experiences like Carlos did with the talking coyote, or Don Juan had with the magical deer. There are magical things that will happen to a warrior on his path as a means to help him recognize that there's so much more to this world than meets the eye, and start to have that romance with knowledge develop. So the mold of man represents a massive energetic development within somebody, that you could even witness something that means that you've really taken care of yourself, or in Carlos's case, you were selected by spirit and Don Juan lent you his energy so that you could have experiences, which
Mm.
is kind of a trick. Like Carlos didn't have a choice. He got tricked into learning. And they say that's the only way to do it, because nobody's crazy enough to get on the path of knowledge unless they were tricked. I believe we're in a time now, though, like the shamans say, where we
Mm.
don't really have a choice. It's out of survival that we remember what we're capable of, because the programming's gotten so thick that
Mm.
we're literally in a state of self-destruction and demise. And those of us that are called to do this work are called to do so from a very deep place, as a means to potentially kind of keep a lifeline available for others, so that
Mm.
evolution, so we can evolve rather than completely, de-evolve.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's where when I've been delving into the whole simulation theory, there was something about it that didn't really fully get there for me with it.
Yeah,
I found its limitation. It had its limitations in terms of the way the construct works, and yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with figuring out
right.
how this realm or this part of the band of awareness works,
Exactly.
as Don Juan talks about. But there are many more bands, and if you just focus on this band, then yeah, that's cool. But the whole point is when I read about the whole point of recapitulation about how to expand your awareness and everything, it ultimately is about awareness, isn't it? Um, and your
Mm,
perception of reality always changes. um, and whenever I feel like I found a truth, there's
mm,
another one. It's like you get to the top of a mountain, there's another mountain to go up, and it's like it's almost endless, and that is what the infinite is in a way, isn't it? There is no
mm.
end to it. But that's a
No,
beauty.
there's no beginning either.
Mm,
And that's what really blows it open is realizing, that like, wow, it's infinite means more than we can perceive of, or even the idea that we are all one. Some people could hear that and be like, oh yeah. But then there's like a deeper level of that oneness that you come into contact with. It's actually almost disturbingly intense to digest how real that oneness is.
mm,
Uh, there's so I'm glad you discovered that the simulation makes sense that we're in a simulated construct within a dream, but the dream is overseen that just because there's simulation within a dream doesn't take away the fact we're dreaming. And just because we happen to be isolated to one dream doesn't mean that there's not others,
mm.
right? So the Toltecs don't say things for no reason. It's not like, oh, well, the simulation disproves the fact that shamans, they just got tricked by the simulation and they think that there's like, no, they're barely giving us little breadcrumbs as a means
Yeah,
to potentially go make these discoveries for ourselves. And so
yeah,
there's a lot of freedom in thinking and being aware and not taking things so seriously. So there's benefits to the simulation concept, like a mortal soul and everything's okay. But I'm here to say, hey, we're fucking mortal. We're gonna
yeah.
die, and you're gonna miss out if you're just thinking that you get another shot at this. That's not how what shamans say at all. They say there is no reincarnation. That all those lives exist right now and here. They're all parallel. And that doesn't mean we won't find ourselves experiencing those at different stages within a linear construct, but we don't want to rely on any of those potential concepts. We want to make
Mm.
full use of this time as much as possible and learn to travel and validate energetic truths for ourselves. So we're not carrying around Castaneda books the rest of our life trying to figure out what's going on.
Yep, yep. Yeah, there's more to it. There's more to it than just the books itself. And that's the beauty of exploring it and actually putting those things into practice. And which I have, to those who are watching, I've only recently started. And to be honest, when I first heard you came on a call with Santos, I think a few years back during the lockdown. That's when I first heard you and heard about your work. And I
Cool.
felt there was something that resonated. And over time it's just been little by little nuggets have been dropped, and there was like this energetic pull towards this knowledge. um and I cannot I cannot thank you enough for putting it out there, because people who are trapped in the again it is still a trap to a certain degree, the truther movement and the
Yeah.
conspiratorial realm. They think it just ends there with the elite and this narrative, and it's like, no, there's way more to go past. So yeah, I'm really grateful to you for that, Joel, for offering self out there for those of us who are seeking something more meaningful.
Mm.
So yeah. um
You're welcome, brother. Thank you for saying
Thank you,
that.
brother. um so I'm just going back to like losing self-importance. um
Hmm.
uh because he says to Carlos, and I want to quote it if that's okay. He says, "Now we are concerned with losing self-importance As long as you feel that you are the most important thing in the world, you cannot really appreciate the world around you. You are like a horse
Mm.
with blinkers. All you see is yourself apart from everything else. So, yeah.
Yes, we want to shatter the mirror of self-reflection and be so in awe of what we're witnessing that we are no longer referencing the self in the same way. We still want to keep our system intact and make full use of this and take really good care of the self. But that isn't out of self-importance, that's more out of survival, out of preservation for the miracle of being a perceiver,
Mm,
to witness all that there is to witness, or to witness, hopefully encounter things that would force you into deep levels of silence, things that are so beautiful, right? And the mother does that. She offers these things as long as you're willing to stay within a certain, you have to find silence within your being. And that's why I do the movements, is they silence me. And then it allows me to then observe through gazing that the world isn't physical and solid like we perceive it to be, which is a miracle of discovery in itself.
mm,
So yeah, it's you said the horse with blinkers on, it was blinders. So
mm.
blinders being like what they put on horses as a
Yeah.
means to like train them to race, so that they're not distracted by what's over here. But we want to open up and have access to things that we can barely like become, even energetically start to perceive from the backside of our system,
Mm.
become conscious all the way around. But that's why shamans, they use the 180-degree view and they take it all in as a means to free themselves up of uh
Tunnel
that
vision.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
so, but interestingly enough, we had a lot of really powerful seers and shamans that fell for the pandemic nonsense and got injected, and like
Mm.
they were, it's like their blinders were revealed. They pretended they didn't have them. It turns out it was an act or whatever, because uh, they yeah. So
Yeah.
it's disturbing and fascinating, and somehow some way we find ourselves here, and it's a perfect opportunity. All of what's going on is a means to really start to have the courage to look at and come and take off our own blinders and
Mm.
stop being so focused on whether people like us or not, whether we have as much wealth as somebody else, all these little things that seem, well, I'm not like that. But if you're really honest with yourself, there's still, the program runs through our social power structure. We look in the mirror, we're caught in this world of self-reflection, and it's very difficult to become fierce enough to break free of those chains, and to have the courage to um really have an inner revolution in which one is no longer willing to carry the heaviness of self-importance, which is that ego dynamic that makes you feel validated on. So it's,
Mm.
a lot of, I was never going to share in the world like ended up doing because of this thing. But then I realized my ego was identifying with being private,
Mm.
and that that I was actually, the most important thing I could do was start to share and learn how to be detached in that as well. So
Mm.
detachment is key. Uh, Fear is attachment, and detachment is freedom. And so there's always an opportunity to become detached and different, and to be an energetic observer even of the self. And that's, the more you recapitulate, it's more like you're witnessing someone else's memories. You start
Mm.
feeling like that's somebody else's life, but you're having the luxury of experiencing it. And then you start to feel sensations of parallel lives. You start to feel connected to these other parts of yourself, and that makes you more otherworldly. You start to become
Mm.
expansive instead of this contracted version of self. Your eyes start to change, you start to become activated, you start to become capable of acts of ruthlessness, being able to say what's needed to be said to people. You become fearless and capable of doing things that would be considered socially embarrassing to others. And there's so much freedom in that as
Mm,
well. And being just willing to be a lighthouse, be willing to shine and be powerful, and not hide that, especially with like family members and people who
mm,
can only see you from their blinders, right? You have the courage to be strong in front of them. And that can be tricky because people, they only see you as far as they remember you when they had power over you. And when they no longer have power over you, they still project that same perception that they've had onto you, no matter how free you become.
mm,
And so it creates this really confronting dynamic, which is a power struggle in itself. This whole place is a power struggle. It's all about power dynamics, realizing this is a world of power and being okay with that. But then, like you said, the truthers get caught up in, well, who's in power and how are they using their power? And if we could just, steal their castles and money and take the power back. And Toltecs aren't like that at all. You don't go and pick a battle with the tyrants. You find out how to transcend energetically and become free of them so that they can't touch you. Let them hoard their wealth and stay in their misery. It doesn't bother me, right? That's their choice.
mm,
This is a rite of passage we're in, and if we're sitting here battling over who has control over this or that, we'll miss the whole point of the development of awareness. And that's what's really at stake here, is our awareness, not the resources. But I get why people get caught up in that. It seems like a worthy cause, but all the rabbit holes have booby traps. They're all designed to hook you so that you're controllable.
mm. I couldn't have said it any better. Yeah, for sure. So many traps on this in this truther movement. And yeah, I wanted to touch on the death being an advisor, because I know
Mm.
you've talked about this many times in other podcasts. Um, and Don Juan says that death is our eternal companion. And he also says that it is always to our left at an arm's length. And in the later books, when Don Juan was talking about seeing, he also talked about the assemblage point moving to the left as well. So do you think there's a relationship between death and seeing?
Yeah. Death is a presence that is conscious, it's feminine,
Mm,
and it's in place to inform us of our power. And they say that the right side of the body is quite perceivable. It's got all these energetic aspects that one can identify. And the left side, the feminine side, is like, it's kind of like the unknown. It's so different. It's not really trackable or explainable. And the assemblage point naturally drifts what feels like to the left when it starts to become free and move,
mm,
because it's going into that abstract, into the magical side of ourself, and accessing, in completely new lines or bands of awareness eventually. And so the assemblage point wants to return to silent knowledge, and it's
mm,
trying to, but there's a predator force, a hypnosis, that's making sure that that assemblage point stays within certain rigid bounds and never discovers, you know, because people have moments where they think they've met God or whatever, but it's really their assemblage point moved, and now they're like, I'm enlightened now, come learn from me.
yeah,
I've met God, right? But all they had was an assemblage point shift that was
yeah.
significant enough to make them believe that they're now special.
Mm,
And in reality, they're probably more deranged than they ever have been, because the assemblage point, all it does is reveal all these other aspects of ourself, and then we try to explain it. So these things aren't really easy to talk about. Death is a presence. It does appear to be to our left. It does. It's like reminding us of our mortality so that we'll be conscious and make use of our time. So they
Mm.
say death is the player and life is the arena. And if it wasn't for death, what would life even be?
Mm.
Right? That's what brings the intensity. And so this force, this hypnotist, these whisperers, these predators, which are just programs, they've convinced us to behave as if we're not going to die.
Mm.
And that's the difference. Toltecs say they are beings who are going to die. And because they're conscious of that, they recapitulate. They know that they can't afford to carry this baggage anymore. And so I've been trying to recapitulate for decades. I haven't gotten that far. It's really difficult
Mm.
to truly do it because there's great pressure not to. And so rather than force through that and, try to override this programming, I've learned to accept myself where I'm at and as I am and go very slow and steady because I've seen what happens when people try to force it. They start to think they're special because of their achievements.
Mm.
So the ego is very advanced, or this predator, it finds a way to hijack you no matter what. Doesn't matter how powerful you get. And that's another thing Don once said is we have a companion for life, and he's referring to the flyers. That we'll always have this dialogue that we think is our mind, but in
Mm.
reality, we're just being told things that keep us in in a state of being controlled. And the predator, that when we think we're afraid, we're actually picking up on its fear of being caught. It's been getting away with this thing of making us think that our thoughts are our own, and it's scared that someday we're going to realize that they're not, and that we're
Mm.
going to learn how to stay in silence, and then this program won't be able to get its needs met from us, which will force us to leave us alone, which the 100th monkey effect will then occur where more and more people will be able to do this. And then this predator eventually won't be able to outmaneuver us in the way that it has. It
Mm.
doesn't mean it doesn't have other ways to do it, but at least we'll be forcing it to reveal its means and methods as we become more capable of observing this phenomenon. And death is really the only advisor and force that can help us become aware of this. Everything death touches, it imbues with power. So we
Mm.
want death in our life. We want to recognize our impermanence so that we fully show up for the experience of living. And shamans, a warrior's greatest accomplishment is joy, is their ability to fully feel connected and guided and in a state of, ecstasy. Really, dreaming is ecstatic. Having access to these really powerful visions and clarities and insights is brings so much incredible purpose. And it's such a contrast between, you know, being in third grade and watching TV shows and thinking that that's all life is about. Like I really bought into this. Oh, this is all it is. We're
Yeah.
just my dad is goes to work and that's what life's about. Like I accepted that. I'm so lucky to have found the Castaneda material because religion didn't do it for me. It didn't
Mm.
reveal, I mean, it did a little
That's it.
bit, but
Mm.
really this stuff it gives access to a totally brand new feeling that I hadn't encountered. And that's what Don Juan says is this is a world of feelings. We think it's a world of objects, but it's just a world of feelings. And so the objects though are great. We get it brings great convenience to be able to be in a world of physicality. It's how we makes it easier to sort of navigate. But eventually we learn to unbind from the physicality and become energy ourselves. And then we will start to see energy.
Mm.
And then, yeah, our death will become not only something we intuit, but we'll be able to observe it as a presence. And similar, when I have helpers show up, there's like lights, there's like flashing colors and things. Um, that help me know what, oh, shifts my perception right away. It alerts me to pay more attention. Um, and so seeing happens, and death is a big part of teaching us to see energy for sure.
Mm. Yeah, I remember Juan Matus also saying about how if you ever fall into impatience or anger, to
Yep.
one of the things he liked to do is roll his eyes clockwise. So there are techniques as well to to use to get us
And
balanced.
extreme, yeah, shamans have extreme attacks of anxiety because their assemblage points attempting to make massive shifts.
Mm.
And so they roll their eyes, and it relieves that anxiety for just a moment to kind of catch your bearings and establish your intent and make come up with a way to navigate the rest of that intensity. Or you could keep doing that. You could, or the magical passes become like a lifeline. Like the fact that you have all these resourceful means and methods to move your system, you're basically fixing your spaceship all the time when you're doing these movements. And so yeah, there are it's we just are very programmed people, and so we almost have to be in situations that are quite trying in order for us to be forced to access the resources that we have available to us. And the only way to develop to grow is to learn about the resources that we have. So rather than try and avoid challenges, we can learn to embrace them, walk toward them fearlessly, and we will learn and fall in love with learning. And that's where there's just a lot of joy comes from learning, from being in the flow state of receiving guidance.
Amazing. Yeah. Um, the other thing I wanted to touch upon, one of the last things I want to touch upon is about um, those of us who choose this path or decide to go on this path. For those of us who have had children,
Yeah.
because obviously they say that those who have had children are not complete.
Yep.
That's quite a hard pill to swallow for some people. Because what do you
Yeah.
mean that it's not complete? And obviously the ego goes off, doesn't it?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and
Mm.
I mean, Carlos had two children from what I remember from reading the material, and he got patched by Don Juan, but the patch didn't have any luminosity. So is there a way for us to, for those of us who have had children,
Hmm.
and coming from your own experience, Joel, as well, like, is there a way for us to obviously patch it out ourselves, or find a way to patch it ourselves? Is the Earth Mother, can she give us some uh some way of teaching us or showing us how to do that as well? Or and then obviously the responsibility then is on us to build that luminosity once it is patched. So can you expand on that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it makes sense that we would lend our luminosity to our children as a means for them to have life, and that's a real honor to be able to do so. But it does put a hole in your luminosity, which makes you uh, not as energetically vibrant as you would be if you had kept it. What happens though typically is people that don't have children don't have the patience. They don't know how to slow down enough to learn. And so they spend their life either addicted to drugs, or they end up sexually obsessed or obsessed with workaholism. There's nothing that sort of like slows them down. They're just so filled with energy,
Mm,
and they typically are repulsed by the idea of having kids. Um, because of that, they really value they energetically sense that. And so there's a benefit to having slowed down and be on the path of knowledge. Like Don Juan had holes as well. From he had
mm,
children prior to his apprenticeship. Um, Lagorda had many, and she ended up purifying herself so completely that she was like a virgin.
wow.
She transformed her womb. So the work is significant. Shamans bury themselves in the earth for long periods of time in order to repair themselves. there is a place that shamans learn to go that is similar to it's what the luminous cocoon goes through upon death, and it forces the cocoon to get rolled over so many times. It's like a tumbler, and it
Mm.
forces the awareness to be broken open, and the ego consumes the memories. Shamans can go there energetically with just their dreaming body and go in and out of that tumbler, supposedly. It's not something I've figured out how to do myself,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it will it will, for whatever reason, it will it will it will heal that patch of energy. And another element of this is that when your children do reach a certain age, naturally a lot of that energy will come back to you
Mm.
if you're on good terms with them and they've figured out how to build their own luminosity out of their own discipline, out of their own self-care. So there's like this uh a little bit of an adjustment that happens, and then you're no longer, you've kind of done your job as a parent, you've gotten them to adulthood, and you're going to get this boost of energy upon that balance, and and then that makes you feel less clingy to your children, because that really was you being clingy to your own energy, if we're really honest about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, but we're in this weird world where, each spirit, like these, my children are more, they're the children of the earth and the sun, and I'm a child of the earth and the sun. So on some level we're more like brothers and sisters. We just happen to be playing out these roles,
Mm.
right? So I trust their spirits to have a magical adventure here, and that's up to them. I'm going to do my best within my means to set that up so that they have the best opportunity. um And there's nothing more beautiful than being in relation with your parent or your children and having it be harmonious. But if it's not, that's okay too. It may need to be that way, as a means of each person's traumatic developments, because trauma is a necessary part of life as well.
Mm.
So this idea that we could have done it different or any of that, it's kind of ridiculous, because every little piece of the blueprint is key to your unique capacity to become dynamic. And we don't want a bunch of copycats. We want people that have found their own authentic relating to the earth and the sun and have developed their own relationship. And so I do believe there's infinite ways to patch ourselves, and it's just a matter of how much time and energy we're able to put into it. So I think sun gazing
Mm.
reaches a point where you cross over, and you're just literally repaired. You've taken in so much direct source light that you're, like, you will experience like psychic surgery, and you will heal on a deep level. I think that burying yourself in the earth and having the intention of being repaired in that way would eventually reach a certain stage where the mother would lend you, like, at least an she would at least explain to you a deep level of recapitulating that one could do in order to reclaim their light. Old school shamans would go back and take their energy from their kids.
Yep. Yeah.
Just
That was mentioned in
just
the
boom.
second Ring of Power, I think it was in that
Yep.
book. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's hardcore. Don Juan set
That's
Donna Sullivan
hardcore.
up. Yeah, he set her up to do that because he knew that it would force Pablito to develop, because he was teaching both the son and the daughter how to become warriors. So he pit
Mm.
them against each other, and he was quite the trickster. So it's pretty dark, and or I don't like to use the word dark, but it's pretty disturbing. Um, but it, shamans say that when you're done with this life, you look back and it's just all hilarious. It's nothing like we take everything so seriously, and we think of things that are very disturbing as being negative. But in reality, it's just a very weird world with very weird sort of rules, energetic rules. They call it the rule of the Nawal. And the rule is so that a party of warriors can come together and defy death, and that's been made available to perpetuate awareness. But death is a very final blow, and so there needs to be that elements of potential loss in order for there to be enough appropriate type of fear to generate the catalyst of wanting to become conscious and make use of this time. Had
mm,
I followed the Castaneda material and gotten spun out on it alone and not followed my heart, I wouldn't have had children. I wouldn't have got into the types of work that I did. I would have gotten caught in the books, and I would have lost my authenticity, and I would have got spun out trying to be something based
mm,
on my misinterpretation of this material.
mm,
But Spirit guided me to do something very different. And I believe that just by proving that one can have children and still be very effective on this path and trust that there's a solution energetically, that's enough for there to be a new neural pathway formed in which an aspect of the rule of the Nawal will be revealed, which will make sense as to why I find myself in my situation. And um, yeah, there's a lot of lunatics and monsters that got a hold of the Castaneda material who think they're really powerful, and they are powerful, but there's no sadness to them. There's no longing. It's like they're just pushing past their trauma, and they're so in desperation of being powerful that they've become these egoic creatures of intent that it's quite sad. And Carlos, I think, would be quite, almost disappointed to see what's come of a lot of these really powerful people. Is they miss the points in the books that talk about the humbleness of the warrior and the sadness and the longing and all those pieces that bring balance. Instead, they're just purely how-to sorcerers, and
mm,
they're no interest in the path of heart. They're just all about moving their assemblage point to really deep places, and then getting credit for being uh extremely powerful. And so there are even ones I've encountered who, have said that I've made everything up that I'm talking about, and they try to discredit me because I'm a threat to their way of explaining things. They believe that, what they call path of heart people are just full of shit, and that it's all about ruthlessness only.
mm. Puts a whole new
So
spin. Yeah. Puts a whole new
yeah,
spin on the petty tyrant as well, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's everywhere.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and just to finish on lighter tone as well. Don Genaro, what a character, what a man, what a teacher.
Yeah,
Every time he come, I mean, obviously Don Juan as well, but he was one like abstract, amazing teacher and the things that he did. And
mhm,
um, did you have any favorite parts of Don Genaro, or any character there that taught you something profound? Because these teachers that Carlos had never took themselves seriously.
that's
Um,
right. Yeah, brother. I love that stuff. They say that, Toltecs are very irreverent, that they don't take themselves seriously. They constantly poke fun at each other and at themselves, and they become very liberated because of it, right? So the timing and the fluidity of a warrior mixed with the ability to be able to use your dreaming body in the way that he could, it just completely is the most perfect way to be trained. So Carlos was so fortunate to have somebody fuck with him so hard like that, and
yeah.
to put him in the most trying situations. And Don Hanaro is proof that you don't need to go to college and develop your intellect and do all the things that, a lot of modern day Toltecs say are important. He became so uniquely energetically free that he fell in love with his life, and he didn't need the company of fellow men. He was able to live alone and enjoy his relationship directly with the mother, and be able to, he developed his luminous fibers so strong that he could do things that would defy, physics, or what people call as being possible.
Mm.
And so he represents that each of us have that part of us within us. And it's just a matter of, yeah, getting clear about how we want to spend our energy. And if we build up enough sexual energy and save it and learn to use it in magical ways, we can start to understand what it might be like. So I'm very much focused on, I spend a lot of time in the wilderness learning to move my body in dynamic ways that liberate me from my own limitations of my physicality. But these, I don't ever expect myself to be as free as these people, because they were forced to change by their teachers. They were
Mm.
put in situations that were impossible, to where if they didn't develop these resources, they would have died. So of course they would have either died or become free in the way that they are. And that's powerful, but that's not what I'm not in that situation. So I have to be creative in another way, and find solutions that bring as much freedom as possible within the fact that I'm still a novice, and these are very advanced travelers of perception. So, um, yeah, man, I think the greatest times that, the what stands out for me is that, and which is something people like us can do, is Don Honaro went on a walk and said, I want you to come find me. And it forced Carlos to use his tracking and his ability to know. And his body knew exactly where he was. But his mind was in the way. And it's these kinds of tricks that we can create within our own lives, where we can find each other in dreaming or in the wilderness, by getting to know that hunter part of ourself that knows. Um, and it's just really magical to start to get to trust the body in this way. And that's a lot of what Don Hanaro was doing to Carlos, was getting him um, to become in tune with the shift of the assemblage point that is needed in order to effectively achieve the tasks that he was handed, by these people. And so, another one was where they took him out. They were like, okay, let's go get in your car. And he goes to get in the car, and the car's not there.
Mm.
And he starts freaking out. Well, where's my car? And they start lifting up rocks and looking for his car and trying to help him find his car. And it's like being on acid, and everybody's fucking with you, and it's like, what a fucking nightmare if you're taking yourself seriously. And he was so easy to fuck with because he took everything so seriously.
Yeah.
So in the end, they finally found his car way out in the middle of the desert, and they drove it home. But in reality, even that was an illusion. The car had never left. The whole thing was just a magician's trick of perception. And there's a lot of little ways to do that in this world that are less intense.
Mm.
Um, and so there's so much fun that we can have with each other as we exploit each other's areas of unconsciousness in a loving way.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I
Yeah.
look forward to exploring more of that in the near future. Um, you said you mentioned that you had a course and other things going on. Is there anything you'd like to share with some of people watching this,
Please, yeah.
Joel?
Yeah, yeah, you can still join. I have a Dreaming Our Purpose course, and we're practicing the magical passes and other shamanic movements, and the internal training, the internal power training that comes from, so more of the energetic martial arts. We're learning to do group dreaming and explore, we're kind of serving as a collection of mirrors, a circle of mirrors where we are working with each other's reflections. There's a lot of discussion around the Toltec material, and we're exploring the different types of not doings that are available to unhook our perception from hypnosis. But the movements themselves, when done in large groups, has a really unique effect. Um, and yeah, we meet for 3 hours each session, and there's 9 sessions. We've already done a couple, but if people want to join, you get the recordings of the last two. And feel free to reach out to my email or to my channel and inquire. We can do a little consult to see if this is a good fit for you. Um, I did just go on Alpha Vedic with Mike Winner and Barry Londo, and had a really powerful talk with those guys, and I have a flood of people coming into the course. So it's getting strong, and it's building and growing and becoming something of its own. And this is something I'll be doing for years to come. So there's no rush, but it's also cool to get in on it in the beginning, because then you become part of that blueprint. It's a very intuitive process. It's not very structured in that there's a lot of uh, we're following a flow of feelings, and we're allowing people to share and ask questions and allowing it to organically develop. But we are covering subjects like fear, clarity, power, old age, death, and really tapping into those, what shamans refer to as the four natural enemies of man: fear, power, clarity, and old age. But death is also a big part of all of that. So yeah, my email is four directions, FOUR, directions with an S, 77 at gmail.com, four directions 77 at gmail.com. Reach out if you feel called to attend the course, and we'll work something out. So yeah.
Amazing, Joel. Thank you so much for taking the time again and sharing
I-
your wisdom, and it's always a joy to do these talks with you. So thank you so much, brother. Really appreciate you.
You're welcome, Ahmed. I always enjoy chatting with you, man, and look forward to doing this in the future. And let's stay in touch, man. Look forward to talking with you.
Awesome, brother. Thank you. Peace
Much,
out.
guys.
Much
Peace
love.
out.